I live in a 13-story apartment building in Canada. It's nothing fancy, just a standard concrete and brick structure that blends in with all the others on the block. But it's home, and after living here for a couple years, I got used to its quirks and routines. One of those routines was doing laundry in the basement. The laundry room is a small, dimly lit space at the very bottom of the building, tucked away in a corner that rarely sees much traffic. On weekends, it's usually empty, or almost empty. People prefer to do their laundry on weekdays or evenings when machines aren't crowded. So I wasn't surprised when I headed down one Saturday afternoon and found the place almost deserted. That day, I was running low on clean clothes and decided to tackle my laundry. I grabbed my basket, took the elevator down, and stepped into the familiar basement hallway. The smell was that typical damp, slightly musty scent you expect in basements. Fluorescent lights flickered faintly overhead. When I pushed open the heavy metal door to the laundry room, I noticed immediately how quiet it was. No washers were running, no dryers humming or tumbling clothes. Usually, even on weekends, there's at least one machine in use. But that afternoon, it was eerily silent. I shrugged to myself. Maybe everyone had already finished. I set my basket down and began sorting my clothes. Lights on one side, darks on the other. That's when I heard it. A soft but deliberate knock on the door behind me. My heart skipped. I spun around and looked through the small, reinforced window in the door. Standing there was a man, late 30s, average build, wearing a plain hoodie and jeans. He looked ordinary, but something about him made me uneasy. His eyes were fixed on me, wide and unreadable. I hesitated a moment, then opened the door. "Hey, can you help me?" he asked. His voice was calm but strained. "I think I left my keys inside," he said, pointing toward the laundry machines. I looked inside again. The machines were all off. I shook my head. "Sorry, they're not here. No one's been in here for a while." He blinked, then looked down, seeming a little embarrassed. "Must have been a mistake," he mumbled. Without another word, he turned and walked away. I locked the door behind me and took a deep breath. My skin still tingled. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I waited another 5 minutes, glancing nervously around, then decided to take the stairs farthest away from where he had been standing. I didn't want to see him again. Later that night, my roommate came over. She had noticed I was on edge and wanted to make sure I was okay. As we chatted, I told her about the man in the laundry room. She said she wanted to see if he was still around. So, she took the elevator down to the basement. As the doors opened on the 3rd floor, the same man stepped in. He looked at her expectantly. When she told him she was headed to the laundry room, he smiled and said, "I lost my keys again." What happened next made her blood run cold. He started asking strange, disturbing questions. "How many dogs have you killed? How old are you?" She said she didn't know what to say. His breath was heavy, and his gaze locked on hers with an intensity that made her stomach turn. She told him she lived on the 9th floor. He paused. Then abruptly, he stepped off the elevator and disappeared. Terrified, she ran down 4 flights of stairs, then up 2, escaping as fast as she could. She told me she'd never felt so scared in her life. We reported the incident to the building management. They promised to investigate and review security footage. But the man was never seen again. Now, every time I go down to the laundry room, a cold knot forms in my stomach. I never go alone. I always keep my phone in my pocket, ready to call for help. Because sometimes, even the most ordinary-looking strangers can hide the darkest intentions. I was about 17 at the time, and I was babysitting my best friend's little sister for the weekend. Her parents were going out of town overnight and asked if I could stay at their place until Sunday afternoon. I'd done it a couple times before, so it wasn't a big deal. The night started out normal. We had pizza, watched some cartoons, and by 8:30 she was brushing her teeth and getting ready for bed. I read her a short story, tucked her in, turned off the light, and shut her bedroom door behind me. I headed downstairs and flopped on the couch in the living room. I was scrolling through my phone, just killing time. Maybe 15 minutes went by. That's when I heard it. A soft click. It sounded like a door opening upstairs. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she got up to use the bathroom or needed water. I called up. "You okay?" No answer. Just silence. I waited another minute, expecting to hear footsteps or the bathroom light switch. Nothing. Everything was quiet again. Still, something felt off. I got up and walked upstairs. Her bedroom door was closed, just like I left it. I knocked lightly. "Hey, everything all right?" No answer. I slowly opened the door. She was sound asleep in her bed. The nightlight was glowing in the corner, casting soft shadows around the room. But then I noticed something. The closet door was open. I was positive I'd closed it earlier. I stepped a little closer, squinting into the darkness of the closet. At first, I didn't see anything, but then I noticed it. Something in the back corner, behind the hanging clothes. A shape. Too tall to be hers. Too still to be anything natural. I reached over and flipped on the bedroom light, and that's when I saw him. There was a man, crouched low in the closet, wearing a dark hoodie. His face was pale. He didn't move. He was just staring at me from the darkness. I froze. It felt like time stopped for a second. Then, suddenly, he lunged. I screamed, stumbled backward into the dresser, and dropped my phone. He bolted out of the closet, shoved past me, and sprinted down the stairs. I chased after him but stopped short at the bottom of the staircase. By the time I reached the front door, he was already gone. I locked every door and window in the house and called 911, shaking. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. They searched the house and confirmed all the windows and doors were locked, except one. The small side window in the garage was cracked open. They think that's how he got in. The scariest part, they found signs that someone had been living in the closet for at least a few days. There were food wrappers, a water bottle, and even a small blanket pushed behind some boxes. He must have been coming and going while everyone was asleep or out of the house. I never babysat there again, and I never leave closet doors open anymore. About a year ago, I bought an old house on the edge of a small town. It was a fixer-upper, something I could afford and customize. The price was low, but the location was great. Quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and plenty of space. The kind of place you imagine settling into, finally feeling at home. The previous owner was an elderly man who moved into assisted living. He seemed nice enough during the sale, but he didn't talk much about the house's history. I asked a few questions about repairs and upgrades, but the attic never came up. That small detail would become important later. For the first couple of weeks, everything was normal. I spent my days fixing up the place, painting walls, cleaning out the garage, mowing the lawn. At night, I'd sit in the living room, the only sound coming from the hum of the heater. But then, a few nights in, I started noticing something strange. It was subtle at first, a faint creak from upstairs, like someone stepping lightly over old floorboards. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, Old houses do that, right? Pipes groan, floors shift, wind whistles through cracks. But the footsteps didn't feel natural. They were deliberate, slow, patient. They seemed to be walking back and forth. One afternoon, while vacuuming the upstairs hallway, I spotted something unusual. A loose panel in the ceiling. It was almost invisible, camouflaged perfectly with the paint and wood. Curious, I touched it, and it popped open. Behind the panel was a narrow attic door, covered in dust and cobwebs. To my surprise, it was unlocked. I hesitated, then carefully lifted the door, revealing a steep wooden ladder disappearing into darkness. The attic was cramped and dim, filled with old boxes, broken furniture, and forgotten junk. Dust hung thick in the air, making me cough. I switched on my flashlight and scanned the room. That's when I saw it. Footprints, fresh footprints, pressed into the thick dust. They weren't mine. Someone had been here recently. As I explored further, I found more signs that someone had been living in the attic. There were folded blankets tucked in a corner, some empty food wrappers scattered around, and a small pile of clothes that definitely didn't belong to me. My heart raced. The thought of a stranger hiding in my home, so close and unseen, it was terrifying. That night, I barely slept. I sat awake on the couch, listening for any sound. At around midnight, I heard it again. Slow footsteps above me, moving carefully but with purpose. I grabbed my phone and flashlight and headed upstairs. At the attic entrance, I found a man. He looked disheveled, with wild eyes and a worn coat. He froze when he saw me, caught off guard. He told me he'd been living there for months. After the previous owner moved out, he'd broken in and stayed hidden, afraid to leave. He was hungry, scared, and desperate. I didn't know what to do. I called the police immediately. When they arrived, they took the man into custody. Later, I learned he had a long history of break-ins and was wanted for several burglaries in nearby towns. Since then, I sealed the attic door permanently. I installed extra locks and security cameras. But sometimes, late at night, I still feel like I'm being watched. Like the house is holding on to secrets I don't want to know. I recently moved into a new apartment complex on the edge of town. It was the kind of place that seemed quiet and safe enough. There were lots of families living there, older couples, young parents, a few students like me. The building itself was old, the kind with creaky wooden floors and thin walls that carried every sound. It wasn't perfect, but the rent was affordable, and the location was convenient for work and school. The first night in my new apartment, I noticed a strange noise coming from next door. It wasn't the usual sounds you expect in an apartment building, like people talking or TV noise. It was heavier. Footsteps that thudded hard on the floor above me at odd hours, doors slamming loudly when no one else seemed to be moving around. Sometimes muffled shouting or what sounded like someone whispering angrily to themselves. I figured maybe it was just a family having some kind of rough patch. You know, couples arguing, kids throwing tantrums, that sort of thing. But the noise didn't stop. It got worse. A few weeks in, I started noticing a weird smell drifting through the walls from that apartment. At first, it was faint, like something was rotting or decaying. Mixed with an old cigarette smoke smell and dampness, it created this thick, unpleasant odor that hung in the hallway outside my door. I mentioned it to the landlord during a routine check-in, but he just shrugged and said, "Sometimes old buildings have weird smells. Nothing to worry about." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then one day, the landlord told me the tenant next door had moved out abruptly. No forwarding address, no notice, just gone. Curiosity got the better of me. One afternoon, when the landlord was busy dealing with some paperwork and not paying attention, I decided to take a quick peek inside the apartment. I was careful, not trying to be nosy, just wanting to see what had been going on next door. When I opened the door, I was surprised to find it unlocked. Inside, it was a mess. Piles of dirty clothes were scattered across the floor. Furniture was overturned. The smell hit me immediately. The same rotting, smoky, damp odor I'd noticed before, only stronger now. I gagged and stepped back. As I looked around, my eye caught something strange. A trap door in the middle of the living room floor. It was old and scuffed, the wood worn smooth from years of use. The edges were slightly raised, as if someone had been opening and closing it frequently. I hesitated before lifting it. Below was a narrow set of stairs leading down into a small basement room. The air was cold and smelled worse down there. It was cramped and dark, with no windows. Inside the basement were dozens of empty food containers, takeout boxes, fast food wrappers, canned food, all piled in one corner. There were blankets folded neatly in another corner, and some strange personal items scattered around. A cracked phone, a wallet with no ID, a half-empty bottle of water. I felt like I was intruding on something private, something not meant to be found. On a small wooden table, I found a stack of journals. The pages were filled with messy, erratic handwriting. As I flipped through them, I read things that made my blood run cold. Rambling notes about watching the neighbors, waiting for them to notice, and repeated phrases like, "They don't see me," and "I'm invisible." It was clear whoever had been living there was struggling, maybe mentally unstable. The journals painted a picture of someone isolated, paranoid, and scared. I left quickly and called the police to report what I'd found. They arrived within the hour, took the journals and evidence, and confirmed the tenant had a history of mental illness. They had been missing for weeks and were wanted for questioning in a few local disturbances. After that, I couldn't stay there. I moved out within a month, but even now, when I pass that building or think about that basement, I get a chill. Sometimes I wonder how close I came to living next to someone so broken and lost, someone hiding away from the world in plain sight. About 6 months ago, I moved into a somewhat run-down apartment complex in a busy city. The building was old and a little shabby, with peeling paint on the stairwells and a faint smell of mildew in the halls. But the rent was affordable, and the location was perfect, close to work, public transit, and my favorite coffee shop. I was excited to have my own place for the first time in years. At first, everything seemed normal. People mostly kept to themselves, and the hallways were quiet after 10 p.m. I liked my apartment. It had big windows, letting in lots of light during the day, and a small balcony where I kept a few potted plants. It felt peaceful, but that peace didn't last. About 2 weeks after moving in, I started finding strange notes slipped under my front door. The first one was easy to dismiss. It read, "I see you." I crumpled it up, assuming some bored kid was messing with me. Then another note appeared the next day. "You shouldn't leave your blinds open at night." That one sent a shiver down my spine. I made sure to close all my blinds every night after that. But the notes didn't stop. Over the next few days, The messages became more personal and unsettling. One read, "I watch you when you shower." Another said, "You can't hide from me." I started looking over my shoulder constantly. My heartbeat sped up whenever I heard a noise outside my door or footsteps in the hallway. I tried to stay calm, telling myself it was probably a prank. But inside, I felt trapped and vulnerable. The feeling of being watched didn't fade. Sometimes, I'd catch fleeting shadows outside my windows late at night. Other times, I'd hear footsteps pacing the hallway outside my apartment, even when I was sure no one else was around. The old building creaked and groaned at night. But these sounds were different, deliberate, almost stalking. I started locking every door and window multiple times a day. I even stopped using the balcony. To feel safer, I bought a cheap security camera online. I set it up so it covered my front door and the large window in the living room. One morning, I checked the footage from the night before. There he was, a man in his 30s, wearing dark clothes, lurking outside my door well past midnight. He paced back and forth, looked through the window blinds, and even tried the door handle a few times. That was when I realized this wasn't just a prank. I called the police immediately and reported the stalking. They told me this wasn't the first time they'd received complaints about a man stalking tenants in that building. They promised to increase patrols and keep an eye out. Days later, late at night, I heard banging on my door. Panic surged through me. I locked myself in the bathroom and called 911. The dispatcher stayed on the line, reassuring me help was on the way. When the police arrived, they caught the man trying to force the door open. He was arrested and charged with stalking and attempted burglary. The experience shook me to the core. Even after the arrest, I couldn't shake the fear. I started sleeping with a baseball bat next to my bed, double-checking all the locks before going to sleep. Eventually, I moved to a new apartment, somewhere quieter, safer. But even now, years later, I'm careful. I always check my doors twice, and I never leave my blinds open at night.